bodies that have been found in a common grave in the basement of this barn along Route 6. Police, firemen, and federal alcohol, tobacco, and firearms agents spent the entire day sifting through the grave. The body of a man was found last night, 2 or 3 others this afternoon, and the search goes on at this hour. Lundgren left the church about 2 years ago.
As the spiritual leader, and from the reports we've received from persons who kind of picked up from things that members of that community referred to him, they referred to him as their prophet.
Lundgren left the church with his followers after he was threatened with excommunication because of his teachings. Police sources tell me Lundgren and his cult then planned to take over the temple using automatic weapons and taking hostages if they had to. Lundgren reportedly wanted to hold on to the temple until the second coming of Christ.
We're in very close discussion with the law authorities, and they helped us to understand that we needed to be careful about our own personal activities.
Then back last April, FBI agents and police surrounded the farmhouse and questioned the group. That's when the plot fell apart. Dennis and Cheryl Avery wanted out. I'm told that's when the Averys and their 3 little girls were executed, their bodies buried in the barn. The cult left Kirtland, and I'm told it broke up just last month. An informant told federal authorities in Kansas City last week exactly where the bodies were buried. In Kirtland, I'm Bill Yunkin, Eyewitness News.
It seemed to be the best kept secret in town. I still think it is, probably maybe in the nation.
Doris Straka lives near this farm. She was one of the first to notice when the Lundgren family and the brood that lived with them on the property vanished. She and another neighbor finally went over one day to look after the animals, the few that had been left behind, and she's been confused ever since. All she knows is that the kids were nice kids, playing on the lawn, helping out with the chores. She knew especially well Damon, shown here in the Kirtland High School yearbook, and Damon's younger brother, Jason.
They were always polite, nice, well-spoken, normal kids.
Since the Lundgren family disappeared, stories have circulated here in Kirtland. The police scene today became a popular attraction. People who couldn't believe something so horrible could happen in their community.
It's hard to believe that, I've passed this place 100 times, and never, thinking.
But of course, Kirtland, Ohio is the perfect place for such a confrontation by Jeff Lundgren. This is the birthplace of 2 religions. Joseph Smith founded the Latter-day Saints in this church back in 1836. This is holy ground to his followers. The Mormons eventually broke off with Brigham Young and traveled to Utah. Those behind espoused a different theology and called themselves the Reorganized Church of the Latter-day Saints. It was within this faith that Jeff Lundgren tried to promote himself to prophet. And once pressured out, it was against this church that Lundgren wanted to exact his revenge. Whether his revenge led to murder is still being investigated. In Kirtland, Rebecca Shaw, Eyewitness News.
One body at a time. Slowly, paramedics and firemen carried the 5 out of the barn tonight. It took about 8 hours for local police and federal agents to dig through the floor of the barn and exhume the bodies.
It's total mud, flood, clay.
Police aren't saying how they were killed, but the killer had gagged and bound the victims with electrical duct tape. They were then buried under a layer of clay, a layer of stone, and a layer of dirt. Police believe the family was killed and buried in April of 1989. For a year and 9 months, the Kirtland Police Department has been investigating several families who lived together in this house, including the Averys and Jeff Lundgren's family. Police believe Lundgren is the leader of a religious cult responsible for the killings. The FBI stepped into the investigation just before April, after members of the group began threatening Mormon church officials in Kirtland, Kansas City, and Utah. ATF joined the investigation because police believed the cult was stocking up on firearms.
No, there was some mention of paramilitary activities. The individuals that were here complained indicated they were survivalist teachers, and they did practice the survival trades or sports, and they did have weapons, but we examined them. One reason that the one federal agency assisted us was that we wanted to find out if there were any automatic weapons, and there were not.
Police say between 10 and 27 people were living in the house at one time. They are going to continue investigating tomorrow morning to see if there are more bodies.
Like many followers of the teachings of the Reorganized Church of Latter-day Saints, Jeff Lundgren, his family and friends moved here from Missouri. The church was founded in Kirtland, and it was a religious experience to work in the temple. Lundgren became a lay minister in addition to volunteering time acting as a tour guide for visitors. But church leaders like Dale Luffman says he changed. He started preaching the Bible according to his own desires.
Kind of made up the rules as he went, and what was most important was what he said.
His group of followers broke from the church and became known as the Lundgren Commune, operating out of the farmhouse and barn along Route 6.
I would say it was very much cult-like. He saw himself as the spiritual leader.
Dennis and Cheryl Avery and their 3 daughters were among his followers.
They were a family that needed somebody to kind of tell them what to do and when to do it, and it seemed, and I think Jeff fulfilled that.
I've been told Lundgren even convinced some followers to turn over entire paychecks to him.
It seemed to be the best kept secret in town. I still think it is, probably maybe in the nation.
Doris Stratka lives across the street from the farmhouse. She said the Lundgrens and others living there kept to themselves. But last April, neighbors knew something was wrong when police and FBI agents questioned Lundgren and his followers. That action came because of death threats and rumors that Lundgren and his followers were planning to overthrow the Kirtland Church and hold the temple until the second coming of Christ. Church leaders were warned by lawmen to be careful. I've been told some were actually given police protection.
And they helped us to understand that we needed to be careful about our own personal activities.
Sources tell me that police raid in April convinced the Averys to back out of the cult, give up the plan to take over the church. It's believed they were then executed, their bodies buried in the barn, and the group disappeared. 9 months later, the folks here in Kirtland finally know the final chapter of Lundgren's Commune.
But the fact is that the Lord speaks very harshly upon those who will not hear His voice. I was constrained by the Spirit, and it was undeniable that it was time to begin to clean house. That it says in the Scriptures, both in the New Testament, the Old Testament, upon your house that will begin. Judgment will begin upon your house. and within my house it began. Yes, it is a great mystery. Yes, it is a great mystery. But the mysteries came forth by dividing the Word. Everything we did was done by dividing the Word. It was shown. There was no Jeffrey thinks it should be done. It all came from the Word of the Lord. The Averys didn't believe, not as they ought. And the issue is, those who sought the truth had classes where more could be given. And from time to time we had classes where less was given. It was always the truth, but less was given because they didn't want more. And there came a point they continued to dwindle in unbelief or dwindle in darkness. And if you would go over the Scriptures, if you do not repent, you would be destroyed. And that is in fact what happened.
Well, he had been told by the church that they did not want him to be a tour guide anymore. And because of that, which reasons I really didn't understand at that time, but that he was simply embracing something called a pattern. And so they wanted him to no longer be a tour guide, and in order to stay on the church property in the house he was living with, he had to continue to be a tour guide. And so since that was eliminated, so was the house. We had different classes, and these classes were basically to reestablish and reaffirm very strongly in our minds that there was such a thing as a pattern, and that the pattern was true. But the basic precept was that if you use the pattern, you can't err. You absolutely cannot flaw in that. And also it was to establish that so that eventually the type of teaching could be provided that anyone who brought forth the pattern and the teachings from it would be the seer. And so ultimately the people who believed the pattern and it was true and that you could not err, you also had to believe that it was the seer that brought it forth. Jeff Lundgren held the classes. I believed at that time that, and it took some time and it took the classes to do it, but I believe that through the numerous scriptures that talk about the pattern and that it does exist, and what the seer in the last days, or this one that Malachi speaks of, Elijah the prophet and all this business, that he would come and that he would proclaim things from the house, and so it was evident that that's who he was to me at that time. Okay. That he was a prophet of the last days to restore things and to prepare for Christ's coming. And in restoring things, basically, he would establish the final church.
Did you consider him a prophet?
Yes.
Did these other members that you spoke about earlier, did they believe similarly?
Yes. A seer is something more than a prophet. Basically, one who is with a seer, the seer is one who teaches, and the prophets are those that go forth and prophesy based on what the seer has taught them and therefore shown them, not only in the written word, but also, when they see God and then he sends them forth. And okay. So a seer's the one that brings the prophets about, so to speak.
Let's go back that he's decided that there will be 5 people. Mm-hmm. Okay, Ron, let's go back to the days right before anything happened to these 5 people. And what did Ron do? What did Jeff do?
As of the days before, I would say within a week before, there was a hole that was dug, and he was assigned to, different people at times. There were different people that did do the digging. I did, Dennis did, Keith did,
Would
Damon
you identify
did.
These people further?
It's Dennis Patrick, Keith Johnson, myself, Damon Lundgren, and also Greg Winship assisted in the digging and preparing of this hole.
Okay, you're referring to a hole.
It was placed in the barn, The reason why the barn was picked was because everything that he explained came out of the record, as warped as it may sound, but the barn was red, and he explained it as Pharaoh's army coming against them at the Red Sea, and they were swallowed in the depths of the Red Sea. Well, the barn has an area that floods every spring when it rains because of where it sits on the property, and so the area within the barn that floods was to be where they would be buried so that they would be covered over within the Red Sea.
Kept striking me that it wasn't just a man or a woman, it wasn't just a husband and wife, but it was 2 generations of the Ivory family that had perished in a really brutal fashion. The site took a lot of concentration, and part of the deal was that it was management of curiosity. A lot of people wanted to be able to, for whatever reason, have a glimpse, find out what was going on, and part of the big issue was controlling the crime scene so that it wasn't contaminated by outside parties.
Procedures are pretty much as they are today. We have multiple agencies involved. We had ATF, FBI, Lake County Sheriff's Department, Lake County Coroner's Office, state agencies from out of state who assisted us. So it was a joint operation by multiple agencies, anywhere from a prosecutor's office to local sheriff's department, state police, covering multiple states.
Money, power, and sex. That's what this case is about. It didn't matter what obstacles she had to remove to get what she wanted. And if it was a person, it didn't matter how. All I want is money, power, and I think I money, power. All I want is money, power, and I think I
guilty or guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Joshua Jackson Vallow and grand theft by deception? Answer, guilty. Is Lori Noreen Vallow not guilty or guilty of first-degree murder of Joshua Jackson Vallow? Answer, guilty. Is Lori Noreen Vallow not guilty or guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tammy Daybell? Answer, guilty. Is Lori Noreen Vallow not guilty or guilty of grand theft? Answer, guilty. dated this 12th day of May, 2023, signed by the presiding officer.
They got the bitch. Hell yeah.